Middlemarch, a study of provincial life by George Eliot. Dorothea Brooke had that kind of beauty which seems to be thrown into relief by poor dress. She was usually spoken of as being remarkably clever, but with the addition that her sister Celia had more common sense. Nevertheless, Celia wore scarcely more trimmings. The Brooke connections, though not exactly aristocratic, were unquestionably good. If you inquired backward for a generation or two, you would not find anything lower than an admiral or a clergyman. It was hardly a year since they had come to live at Tipton Grange with their uncle, a man nearly 60, of acquiescent temper, miscellaneous opinions, and uncertain vote. Dorothea, the elder of the two sisters, was not yet 20. She was regarded as an heiress, for not only had the sisters 700 a year each from their parents, but if Dorothea married and had a son, that son would inherit Mr. Brooke's estate, presumably worth about 3,000 a year, a rental which seemed wealth to provincial families. But rural opinion about the new young ladies, even among the cottagers, was generally in favour of Celia, as being so amiable and innocent-looking, while Miss Brooke's large eyes seemed too unusual and striking. Poor Dorothea. Yet those who approached Dorothea found that she was open, ardent, and not in the least self-admiring. Indeed, it was pretty to see how far her imagination adorned her sister Celia with attractions altogether superior to her own. And if any gentleman appeared to come to the Grange from some other motive than that of seeing Mr. Brooke, she concluded that he must be in love with Celia. Sir James Chatham, for example, whom she constantly considered from Celia's point of view, inwardly debating whether it would be good for Celia to accept him. That he should be regarded as a suitor to herself would have seemed to her a ridiculous irrelevance. Dorothea, with all her eagerness to know the truths of life, retained very childlike ideas about marriage. Sir James Chatham was going to dine at the Grange today with another gentleman whom the girls had never seen, and about whom Dorothea felt some venerating expectation. This was the Reverend Edward Casaubon, noted in the county as a man of profound learning. Over dinner, Dorothea thought Mr. Casaubon's manners very dignified. The set of his iron-grey hair and his deep eye sockets, as different as possible from the blooming Englishman of the red-whiskered type, represented by Sir James Chatham. "I am reading the agricultural chemistry," said this excellent baronet, "because I am going to take one of the farms into my own hands, and see if something cannot be done in setting a good pattern of farming among my tenants. Do you approve of that, Miss Brooke?" "Great mistake, Chatham," interposed Mr. Brooke. "Going into electrifying your land and that kind of thing, you may as well keep a pack of hounds." "Surely," said Dorothea, "it is better to spend money in finding out how men can make the most of the land which supports them all, than in keeping dogs and horses only to gallop over it." Here, Mr. Casaubon turned his eyes very markedly on Dorothea while she was speaking, and seemed to observe her newly. After dinner, Dorothea said to herself that Mr. Casaubon was the most interesting man she had ever seen. When the two girls were in the drawing-room alone, Celia said, "How very ugly Mr. Casaubon is." "Celia, he is one of the most distinguished-looking men I ever saw." "He talks very little," said Celia. "There is no one for him to talk to." Celia thought privately, "Dorothea quite despises Sir James Chatham. I believe she would not accept him." Celia felt this was a pity. She had never been deceived as to the object of the baronet's interest. Mr. Casaubon stayed a little longer than he had intended, on a slight pressure of invitation from Mr. Brooke. Was his endurance aided also by the reflection that Mr. Brooke was the uncle of Dorothea? Certainly he seemed more and more bent on making her talk to him, on drawing her out, as Celia remarked to herself, and in looking at her, his face was often lit up by a smile like pale, wintry sunshine. Before he left the next morning, while taking a pleasant walk with Miss Brooke along the gravel terrace...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?